Good day. Thank you for listening. I am Tamara Scott. You're joining us at Truth for Our Time here on Webcast One Live Studios. We thank Mac for letting us share the studio with him, and 99.3 FM if you listen to the show Sunday at noon in Central Iowa. We appreciate 99.3 FM, the Truth Network, sharing the air with us there. As you know, the purpose of this show is helping you live God's Word in today's world, because if He expects you to live through it, He's directed you how to do it somewhere in His Word. So no matter what the circumstance is, no matter what the outlook, the forecast, we have to remember that there's no surprises on God's day planner, and He has a way to bring us through whatever it is, the valley, the journey, the mountaintop that we're traveling on. Joining me first, we're going to go right to the phone line because I'm sure he has quite a busy day today, is Ed Martin. Ed is the president of Eagle Forum, and as you know, Phyllis Schlafly started Eagle Forum, and I'll let Ed just kind of give us the background on when she started that and some of her legacy. But Ed, thank you so much.
Oh, glad to be with you tomorrow.
So, when was it that Phyllis started Eagle Forum?
Well, it's a wonderful history to talk about. It's sort of amazing to think that she's not here. She started in public life when she was 22 in 1946. And so over all these 70-plus years, she started about, I think we counted up 22 organizations. One was fighting against the communists. Another was for teaching education, phonics instead of whole language, all different kinds of things. Eagle Forum was started in 72 to fight, really 74 it was incorporated, but it was 72 when Phyllis took on the ERA fight. And then she realized she needed to build a coalition of people, mostly women at the time, to fight back. And many things are distinct about it, but when you mentioned it just now on the run-up, Phyllis was really great about welcoming to that coalition Orthodox Jews, members of the Mormon Church, conservative evangelicals, Catholics, and it was a group that really came together to beat ERA and its threats in a particular way. So that's when Eagle Forum started, but Phyllis's contribution, as you know, from your great work at the RNC and the Republican Party, Phyllis has been a force in the Republican Party since 1952 when she went to that convention. So she's done a lot of different things, but that's how we started out Eagle Forum.
Has she been at every convention since 1952?
She has, yeah. In fact, as you know, one of her favorite things to say is that politics is where the action is. And so our goal for the last 2.5 years was to make sure that we got to Cleveland, and Phyllis was a delegate, and that we got a great platform, and that, she loves that fight. And in some ways, I don't know that I believe it because I'm still in disbelief, but I think she thought that was her sort of great final fight. She went one night at the convention. As you know, some of the nights are kind of long and they drag on, and I said, Phyllis, you don't have to stay for all these speeches. And she said, of course I do. I'm a delegate. And that was her style,
Yeah, she was tremendous. One of the things that I have said about her was that while the feminists were arguing over whether or not to wear lipstick in the office, she was talking about Supreme Court justices. She was talking about issues of sovereignty. She was dealing with the real and the meaningful issues of the day, way ahead of her pace.
Yeah, one of her sons said, Andy said that he thinks that she'll be remembered in large part for her foresight.
Yeah.
She tended to see things ahead of other people and to be able to begin the battle. And a good example is pro-life. In 1973, after Roe v. Wade, you had President Nixon and his wife, and then soon after, President Ford and his wife, and Bob Dole, who was so strong in the Senate. They all said we need to be a pro-choice party, the Republican Party. And Phyllis and a band of women at the time started an effort to build the pro-life platform plank. And I'll tell you a quick story. At the Republican convention in Cleveland, there was a reporter from McClatchy, and he came over to me at one point in the break of the platform fight. The committee was meeting, and he said, Ed, I was there in 1980. That's the first time I met Phyllis Schlafly. And then you were fighting over the Republican Party being pro-life or pro-choice. Now they're in there fighting about whether to use the word unborn and preborn.
Right. That's
and
right.
he said with a smile, he said, I think Phyllis won that one. And so, that was the way she thought was you could see ahead she could see ahead and figure out these arguments and the issues. And I think it's probably right. You know, in the ERA fight, she predicted if the ERA passed, you would have people that wanted bathrooms that had to be men and women allowed. Transgender problem, you know. In the ERA fight, she was quoted as saying, you're going to have to draft women into combat. And that's where we are. And these things, now, sometimes I would gently tease her and say, the feminists didn't win the ERA, but they came back and won a lot of it by piecemeal. And that's sort of true. But that's the fight that we always have to keep having.
But let's talk about that ERA just briefly, because she took that battle on alone. I remember today there are good pro-life, pro-family leaders who will admit that they said to Phyllis, you are losing this battle. It's already done. And Ed, I don't know if you know the numbers, but just 2 years ago, she stood for 45 minutes, not long after healing from her broken hip, on a stage here in Des Moines at the Faith and Freedom Coalition and took us through this battle. And she had the numbers of states that had already ratified it. And let's remember, this was before the day of email. Mm-hmm. So she was doing this by postcard and phone call, but she took this battle on singly as a woman. Do you remember how many states had ratified it already?
Yes, let me try to run through it, but let me tell you a quick story about that. Phyllis was really well known for being a fighter on what's called the strategic balance. In the 1960s, she was a well-known writer and was talking about the Soviet Union and that we shouldn't give in to their strength. So in 1971, she gets a phone call from a supporter in Connecticut, and she says, come up here and give a speech in December. And of that year, 71. And Phyllis said, well, I don't travel in December because I get ready for Christmas and I just don't do it. And the supporter said, you have to come. And then the woman said, you have to speak on the ERA. And Phyllis said, oh, no, I've been given thousands of speeches on the military and the need for military superiority. I'm not doing that. And the woman said, listen, I'm going to send you all the information. Read it. You need to come do this for me. So they sent her a package, and she told the story. She read it over the weekend with her husband, Fred, who she was so close with and did so many things with in terms of this work. And when she was done the weekend reading, she realized the threat of the ERA. She gave the talk in December in Connecticut, and in February she wrote a PS report, the Phyllis Schlafly report, on the subject. And it became the document that people handed around to members of state legislatures. And so here's where we were. I think about 12 senators voted against ERA, maybe less. Maybe 20 House members voted against ERA, about that number. So everybody wanted it. 30 states ratified it when Phyllis got involved. And in the first year she was involved, 5 more states ratified it. But 5 states rescinded it because of Phyllis. They took it back. So they were awash after the first year. And she loves a speech she gave in Tampa, I think it was Tampa, a few years ago, that's called Doing the Impossible. It's on our website, eagleforum.org, and basically categorizes, goes through all those things you're saying. But you're right about one key detail. She was a very savvy political organizer. In the 40s and 50s, she used book study clubs in homes. In the 50s and 60s, she started writing books and columns and doing radio and some TV. And then in the 70s, she really mobilized an army that used sort of grassroots lobbying techniques that were sort of first in their country. I mean, the first in the nation, and she won. And so she was really a kind of trailblazer in political strategy and tactics that people also will always, I think, study.
She is certainly well respected, and I'll just say this: in the world that in which I live, in the ministry world, there is so much sexism, and even on radio, Christian radio, female talk show host, there is so much sexism. Phyllis worked her way through it, and because of her work, was well respected, even amongst those arenas where women are often not allowed to participate at the same rate as men. So she certainly earned her way through. Ed, we have some time left before we go to our first break. We want to pay homage and honor to Phyllis, because America would not be where America is right now. The Republican Party would not be the party of life that it is right now without a Phyllis Schlafly. But I want to give her certain honor and to her legacy. But I also know you have work to do. You are the president of Eagle Forum. They've had their own issues a little bit over, I believe, it was over her endorsement of Donald Trump, and I don't want to get into the quagmire of that, but again, you talk about her foresight, and I believe it was her foresight that gave her the courage to stand up with a Donald Trump early on.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me make one comment about the women in ministry work, and your comment, which you know better than a guy like me. But Phyllis often said, and one of her favorite phrases was, she said, "I did it all, just not all at once." Right. And, for her, she was a wife. She loved her husband, Fred. She talked about how she learned from him and she made him better. They were really an interesting partnership. He's been deceased for 22 or 3 years. So, but then she was a writer. She was a mother of 6, grandmother. She did all sorts of things. So she did it all. And I think sometimes the feminists hated the fact that she was willing to do some of the things the feminists didn't. A lot of them never married. A lot of them never thought that was a good use of their time. So that's one thing to just say, to salute follow on to your point. Well, look, Eagle Forum and Phyllis's organizations, she left us with job to do. She left us with, we have a plan for the next number of years that she had us intended to do, but we also, in the short term, we had written this book that sort of pulled together Phyllis's writings on Trump, and then she rewrote some of it, and then Brett and I kind of worked on it, and we rushed it. It took about 8 weeks, and we put this book together, which was launching on Tuesday.
The day after Phyllis.
Yeah. I mean, we were like almost stunned, like she did us a favor, because the whole world is suddenly looking at the book and we're having a chance to talk about what she said. But anyway, her son called me on the day she died, and Monday, and we'd been expecting it, and he said, "Ed, look, Mother would want you to have a good cry, maybe 10 minutes, and then get on that plane to New York and go on Fox and Friends tomorrow and help people understand why she supported Trump." And you're right, the Trump pick was disappointing to some, but I think over time, what our book says, and the conservative case for Trump is, there's a lot of really good reasons to be for Trump, to be understanding that he can be great for the country and for conservatism, and that's the argument that Phyllis was making.
And so I appreciate you, Ed. I know this has got to be hard on you. You and Phyllis grew very close in the short, is it 3 years you worked with her, 2 years you worked with her?
Yeah, about 3.5, yep.
And I appreciate what you said, and I'm going to share it, and I hope I don't offend you. But you said she's caused you to be a better writer and much a stronger in prayer. Go to prayer much more quickly and stronger. And what, Ed, I'm so pleased that you've had this time with her, that God has poured into you through Phyllis, because you are a champion like she is. You're willing to take the hard moves sometimes and stand strong even amongst your friends. And I'm going to be praying for you as you continue this torch and carry forward, because Eagle Forum is too important. We need Eagle Forum. We can't have it in these arguments amongst the groups, and I hope you can all work it out, because whether it's the Con, the Article 5, the Treaty of the Sea, we need the wisdom of Phyllis Schlafly. Did I lose him?
No, I'm here, but I do have to go pretty quick.
Yep. You got 2 minutes before we go to break. So anything I know you've got the visitation today, another memorial tomorrow, and then your convention is next weekend, and you are carrying on. And folks, if they wanted to come to that convention, where would they get information? EagleCouncil.com is our website, and thank you. Yeah, the visitation is from 3 to 8 today. It'll be a long time, lots of wonderful friends. Funeral tomorrow in St. Louis at 2 p.m., and then next week, 16, 17, 18, we have a battery of speakers. Phyllis has been bringing together her Eagles since earlier, before she started Eagle Forum, and she approved all the speakers. She approved the agenda. We made one change. We're going to have a memorial celebration for her at 10 a.m. on September 17th. Ralph Reed just called me a few minutes ago. He's going to come in for that, and Richard Vagary and a lot of folks. Ben Carson's already in town as one of our speakers. So it's going to be a wonderful weekend for Eagles. Bittersweet in some ways, but as Phyllis would say, we got work to do and got to keep doing it. And did you know, I don't even know if you knew, and we've got to go to break here, Constitution Day is September 17th. How I did, fitting. Yeah, I did. How absolutely fitting. Just like some of our founders passed away on July 4th, it's fitting that you honor her on Constitution Day. Ed, thank you for sharing your time with us. Thank you. God bless you. Blessings. Bye-bye. Folks, we've got to go to break. We'll be right back. We'll be talking with Robert Montserrat on his work at 9/11 and after the fact, and we'll be honoring those victims. Stay tuned. Truth for Our Time.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Northern Lights Pizza, your home of the tasty crust. Our garlic butter sauce now available in 12-ounce bottles at Northern Lights, Hy-Vee, and Graziano's.
Northern Lights Pizza.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can give these grandkids back, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We can help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Rockton Prevention is celebrating 25 years of creating a caring community. We want to say thank you to the tens of thousands of Rock High School mentors that have carried our message of health, love, and encouragement to over 1.5 million children, teachers, and parents. Our mentors teach children methods and skills to prevent bullying and drug use. Thank you to all the school administrators, teachers, and counselors for their opportunity to serve you. Rock on, fair citizens. Rock on. This is Pat McManus for Rockton Prevention, the Richard O. Jacobson Foundation, and this station.
Hey everybody, I brought Northern Lights Pizza, and it's got Graziano's sausage!
And thanks for staying tuned with us. I am Tamara Scott. You're listening to Truth for Our Time on 99.3 FM, Sundays at noon, Fridays 10 a.m. Central. Fridays 10 a.m. Central. And Bob, you're saying that some folks can't get the show on
live stream.
Webcast1live.com, where we usually tune them in. Where do they go?
Right. If they go to Max World.
Max World, they can find it.
They can find it there. It'd be on a different streaming.
Okay. So maybe some of those technicalities, but we'll try and get the link up later as well. I'll put that at least on the Truth for Our Time Facebook page. And at some point, someday, maybe I'll get an intern. Maybe God will bless me with an intern, or I'll somehow be able to go on and get the website, truthforourtime.com, all caught up. But I'm too busy doing right now to be writing about what I'm doing. So we'll try and get those up there later. Bob Montserrat, if you just heard, is that voice that you hear with Mac on Mac's World Live at 3 to 5 each weekday on webcast1live.com and 99.3, they simulcast. You are the cat in the hat, as he refers to you. And I don't know where that comes from, but I'm assuming it's from the many hats that you wear.
That's correct. I wear hats all the time.
Well, see, you're talking physically, but I'm thinking you've all the hats, that figuratively, all the things you've done, all the many responsibilities you've had as well.
That's true. Outside of radio, yes.
Yes. And so in just follow through, we just spoke with Ed Martin, who is the president of Eagle Forum. Phyllis Schlafly, I'm telling you, the mark that woman left on this earth is amazing. One, for our country, but what our country has learned and will go across the globe. And two, Bobby and I were talking between breaks. I appreciated Ed when he so gracefully brought back the fact that though she made such a difference, and though she was such a strong woman and a movement in herself, her family came first. Whether he was talking about that December timeout she took for her family, you and I were talking, she did it all, but she came back and got her law degree in the 70s, I think after she'd raised her family. So women out there, do not be discouraged. Do not think your life is reduced to changing diapers and washing hands. That is the most important job you're ever going to do, changing those hearts, plugging into those minds, feeding those souls on the foundations that they will lean to throughout the troubles in their life, and how they will treat others as an adult is more important than anything else you're ever going to do. It's more important than any song you're going to write, any law you're going to pass, any book you're going to read or write. And if I could just encourage you in that role, but doesn't mean you're reduced just to that role of the daily monotonous routine. There's more for you to do.
That's right. And it's actually, that time goes by very fast.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. And you say, where has time gone?
It does.
Yeah.
And everybody warned me of that. So I would take pictures of them sleeping because I wanted to remember that moment. You know, I tried to capture everything I could. And I know at the end of the day, sometimes you're just exhausted, but not a day went by where I didn't want all of my children under my roof, tucked in their beds. And, you know, never was there a child so perfect that their mother wasn't ready for him to take a nap. I get that.
That's right.
But I was so thankful that God let me have 4 in my life to which I could pour into.
Yes.
And it reduces me to tears still that he trusted me with it.
Right. And every time they come back, it's a celebration when they come to visit. And
See, Labor Day.
Yeah.
I wanted my kids to come home, and not all, you know, as they grow, you can't always get your kids together. And it's so much to me to have all of my kids together at the same time in one place. And so even preparing, as I was mowing the yard the days before, I would be praying over my kids, over their schedules, over the lawn, over the dog, that he would behave, that everybody would just have a blessed retreat and a time of refreshing. And I'll tell you what, we have talked several times since Labor Day. We didn't have any big to-dos. The boat had broken. We sold it. So, you know, all those fun things you look to, it was just our kids, our home. And my parents were there, my mom and my stepdad, and they were able to hold the babies while my kids were then able to play some badminton and some tetherball, and just really, we just had fun.
Mm-hmm.
And you forget how important that is to a family.
Oh, right. I'm assuming you took photos also.
I think several did. Now, here's the bad news. They're all digitally somewhere on one of my devices, and I don't know if I'll ever see them again in my life. I feel like I live in the 1800s when you had the one photo of your marriage and the one photo of a dedication, and that was it. And, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So somewhere they're in there, and I've got to figure out how to get them. But here we are talking about family, and that's the whole reason we're here. God made us. He gave Adam that helpmate. He gave us those in our lives to love, to cherish, to honor. And Bob, you and I are going to be talking today. The reason you're here, and I appreciate you coming in, is 9/11 is Sunday. So as folks are listening to the show on 99.3, it will be the 15th anniversary of the attack on the towers, the attack on the Pentagon, the attack that was meant for, I don't know where, but crashed in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And then we'll talk also about Benghazi, the attack 4 years ago, or it could be a 5-year anniversary, depending on how you count the date. 9/11 is a date for those in the Muslim culture where they do a lot of conquering and attacking. And so it's not anything new, and it's not just for us in America. I want you to understand that. You can go to the gates of Vienna, I think is the search you would do to study some of that and why. But Bob, I'm going to start out with a calendar. And Goose, I don't know if you can go to my Facebook page for those who are viewing. I put a post up the other day, and I should probably find it myself. It irritates me that the calendar simply says Patriot Day. And apparently it is because of a resolution that they put forward, and of course my page isn't going to let me go down to my own post now. A post that they put forward, a resolution that they put forward, and we hear people trying to make it a day of civic service and volunteerism. And just on my way in today to the studio, I heard another station talking about doing something special, doing a service, taking something to Goodwill, giving something to somebody that needs it. That's all well and good, But like you and I are talking about our families, it's not just those special days, it's the relationships, the building, the nurturing that goes on all the time.
That's right. It's not just the one day.
No, those acts of kindness should happen all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's okay to remember them on that day, but my fear is this. As Pearl Harbor has been decades ago, Pearl Harbor still says a day of remembrance on the calendar to remember the lives lost. Patriot Day does not give anybody the idea of what took place, the horror, the tragedy, the hate.
That's correct. That's correct. I wouldn't associate 9/11 with Patriot Day. Me personally.
Right. And I get now that we had Benghazi. Those men were certainly patriots. They absolutely were. The bravery that they went against orders when told to stand down, when they realized Americans were not, the American administration, Obama and Hillary Clinton, were not going to come help them. They still fought the best they could. That is certainly a patriot and a hero.
Yes, and that movie they made, The 13 Hours,
yes,
very much impacted me. I went to see that, and that gives you a pretty good idea of what they went through and what took place.
And if you haven't seen that movie, we highly recommend that you do still go and see that movie. All right, so here's what I'm going to, I did find my Facebook comments. Let's see if I can find one of my responses, because someone gave me the link as to why they've done this. And my response is this. Well, it's not going to play along. While service and civic volunteer work are all good, this is my point of contention. 9/11 is more than a patriotic day of service. It is the date America was attacked twice in the last 15 years. My other contention is in the eyes of Islam jihadists who hate America, 9/11 pilots could very well be considered patriots. Patriot Day on the calendar could be viewed as a celebration for jihadist sympathizers in our country. So again, like Pearl Harbor, our calendar should speak clearly of remembrance and respect for the innocent lives lost at the hands of those who hate us, so it is never forgotten and we are less likely to ever allow it to happen again.
Yes, I agree.
All right. No, thank you, Goose. You've got, my producer has it up on our screen for those of you who are watching live. So 9/11, Bob, where were you that day?
Well, 9/11, I was working for the state of Iowa, the Division of Criminal Investigation Crime Laboratory, and I was on the job, and I was in Sioux City.
You were in Sioux City.
In Sioux City, I was at a police department, and after the first plane hit the first tower, one of the police officers came to tell me that a plane just ran into or flew into one of the towers. So he invited me into the room where the TV was, and when I got there, that's when I saw the second plane hit, and I knew at that time that it was a terrorist attack. There was no question, and I knew that I would probably be going there.
Because of your work with the DCI?
Well, no, actually because of my work on the federal mortuary team.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the mortuary team is called a DMORT, which is Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team. And so it's a team that's comprised of experts in different fields, pathologists and morticians and dentists and medical legal people that work in the medical examiner's office. And the job is to identify those that have died, whether it's from a terrorist attack or natural disasters, whatever the occasion, plane crashes and so forth. That's what the team was designed to respond to if that help was needed. If it overwhelmed the ability of the local people, then we would go in to assist them do the work.
You had done that in Sioux City with the plane crash, what year?
That was 1989, July 19th, 1989. Those are dates that I remember when you do disaster work and experience trauma, then you tend to remember those dates and those times when you were there.
We can imagine, because for those of you listening like myself, we probably all know where we were in 9/11. I had just started homeschooling my kids, best decision we ever made. And we were outside doing the chores in the morning, feeding the horse. My husband came pulling up the driveway. In a bit of urgency, he said, "You need to go inside. You need to watch the news. A plane has hit the tower." So we went inside, And I was able to, we just crawled back up in my bed, put the kids right with me, snuggled in, and we watched as the morning shows were just kind of evaluating what had happened. At that point, they didn't know if it was an accident. They didn't know what had happened. And as they were watching, it unfolded before us that another plane had hit the towers, and they realized as well. And I was so thrilled that my kids were with me right then, under my arms, under my wings. Now, 2 of my older children, one was already in college, and the other was in high school. And so he was at the public school. But I knew he was at least of an age where he could get himself to help if he needed to. He could call mom if he needed to where my younger elementary kids had already experienced Columbine in the public schools, and I didn't want them hearing the teachers' subjective views of what was taking place. I wanted them under my teaching and a faith in God Almighty. Mm-hmm. And so we went to prayer for our nation. We prayed for our family. And it's etched forever. So for many of you out there listening, I'm sure the day is etched in your mind as well.
That's correct. Any type of disaster that impacts the nation, the world, whatever, is something that people remember. I've talked to people that experienced Pearl Harbor and how that affected them. It made a huge impact on them and the loss of life that happened back then. So I understand what that means and what it is.
And so we're going to take our break here shortly, and when we come back, we'll come back and talk a little bit about the work you actually did there, the CSI work that you did there, and we'll talk maybe about the memorial that I just was able to see just shortly. It's in June of this year, and we'll touch on Benghazi perhaps, but we're going to also talk about where we're going forward as a nation as well. Stay tuned. Truth for Our Time as we remember a day of remembrance, 9/11.
Northern Lights Pizza's amazing garlic butter makes amazing breadsticks. Now available in 12-ounce bottles at Northern Lights, Hy-Vee, and Graziano's.
Northern Lights Pizza. I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Hobbs.
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed, fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 100 to get through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're going to make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
Truth for our time, as we help you live God's word in today's world when the headlines hit home, because if he expects you to live through it, he's directed you how to do it. And remember, the word says, the righteous man may have many troubles, but the Lord availeth him or bringeth him through them all. And so just one of those days like this, Bob, you probably know better than most because now you're a chaplain and you also work in mental health.
That's correct. I do the mental health for the DMORT team. I'm their mental health person, and I'll fill in as chaplain if we don't have our chaplain there.
But so even folks who weren't there on 9/11, this day can be very, very emotional for them. And honestly, I think it should be a sobering day.
Yes, it's for me. It's definitely emotional because it brings me back to the time I spent there, and to the stories that I heard over the time from people that suffered through trauma. Because that was part of my job, was to be a counselor to those that needed to talk. And so I talked to an awful lot of different emergency workers. There were even family members that I dealt with of those that were lost at the towers. And so you go and reliving those experiences and those stories that I've actually written down a lot of what I experienced because that was part of what I needed to do. Right. To deal with my own stress, because you can experience secondary stress when you hear people's stories. It can stress you out, and so not only did I see what they saw as far as I saw it on TV, they saw it when they were actually there, and then you can be traumatized later after hearing a lot of stories.
And so I want to take our listeners kind of through your service there. I am pulling up the timeline of the day. As I said, it was early morning for us, but they're an hour ahead out there. 7:59 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 takes off. 8:14, United Airlines Flight 175 takes off from Boston. And 8:19, Flight 11, alert ground personnel that they have been hijacked. 8:20, American Airlines. Anyway, you can read all through that. You can do it's thehistory.com. If you just type in a search for 9/11 timeline 2001, you have to put in 2001 because we've had attacks down in Benghazi, 2012, right. And we've had attacks 9/11 all the way through history with Islamic forces behind it and jihadi attackers. But the timeline is there. I saw it when I was at the museum in June. My concern about the museum, Bob, is I feel like one, they purposely made it very cold and sterile. I get that. But I felt like it had been sanitized. I felt like it had been sanitized of some of the honest, personal reflections of the day. And I'll save that. We'll come back to that towards the end. I know for you got out there in October.
That's correct.
3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks?
Yes.
2 weeks after?
Yes, because after I heard about that, and I was driving back from Sioux City, and I don't even remember the 3 hours I was driving back because I was listening to the radio, listening to everything as it was taking place, and so it was just a blur. But when I got home, I had phone calls from Red Cross, from World Relief, from DMORT, and they all wanted me to help. And since I signed up with the DMORT team, I was going to go with them. And so they immediately, when I called them, they said, we want you to drive down to Kansas City and catch a C-130 military plane, because if you remember, no planes could fly other than military. And so they said, we need you to go to, we're going to fly to the Pentagon, because at that time, they didn't know how many people had perished. They thought it was 800 or 900 people that died at that time. And so they said, can you go? And I said, no. And I said, get me the second round. And they said, okay. So they passed on me. And the reason I did that was twofold. First of all, I was an emotional wreck. And I knew that in order for me to help people, I had to get my act in order.
Right.
Number one. Number two, I had cancer. I was diagnosed with cancer in March. It was melanoma. And I was going through cancer chemotherapy at the time, so I didn't have all my strength. And I knew that if I was going to go down there and work, it was going to be at least 12-hour days. Turned out to be 15 to 17-hour days that I was working when I got there. And so I didn't feel like I was up to it, and so I passed. And they always tell you, if they don't feel like you can do it,
right,
pass. So then I said, get me next time. And then they did ask me to go to New York and to work as a counselor to deal with the emergency workers that were working out there, family members, anyone that needed help. And so at that time I said, yes, I'll do it. I was still doing the self-injections of chemo at the time, and I wasn't sure if I could do it physically, but I felt like I should be out there. And so I did go, and sure enough, worked 15 to 17-hour days, dealing with many people, many stories, and it was emotional for me because you're taking on a lot of people's pain, and so you're there to take it
right
from them because they have to tell their stories.
Right.
And so I heard many stories of hurt and pain and loss of life, and so it's important for people to be able to speak and to be able to express themselves. Otherwise, it's going to hurt you internally if you don't let it out.
Was it concerning for your family to let you go when you were in the middle of chemo?
Yes, but they knew that that is what I was called to do, and I was going to do that. And yet I had time to, process a lot of things before I went, knowing that it was going to happen. And so people knew me there and saw me as a counselor for the DMORT team. And I remember Fire Marshal from the New York Fire Department called me over, and he says, I need to tell you something. And I said, that's what I'm here for. Tell me what he says, well, I was here when the planes hit the tower. And he says, after that first plane hit, I started running through the streets to get there. And he said, and when I was running there, he said, I could hear people were throwing water balloons, and I can hear the water balloons. And I thought to myself,
oh, no.
I thought, why would people be doing that? I mean, here are these towers burning. This is ridiculous. And he says, and as I get closer and closer, he says, I could hear the water balloons. But what I realized when I finally got on scene, that they weren't water balloons at all.
Uh-huh.
These were bodies that were falling from the towers, hitting the ground, and they were exploding and sounded just like water balloons. And he says, I'll never forget that. He says, it's burned into my mind. And he says, but I just had to tell you that that's what I experienced. I just wanted somebody to know.
He had to work it through.
Right. He wanted somebody to know.
And so that, Bob, okay, this is why I don't like Patriot Day on the calendar. Not that I want something that gruesome, but I get that we have a resolution in Congress now calling this a day of service and patriotism. But for everybody who's never going to read that resolution, the millions who are just going to see the calendar, they're not going to remember that we were attacked that day and that 2,753 people. This was not Pearl Harbor where they were all signed up in the military and knew the risk. This was moms, dads, daughters,
yes.
sons, grandmas,
yes.
grandpas, kids in daycare, people who had just gone every day about their lives.
Yes.
And their lives were snatched.
Yes. And do you know there are over 1,100 people that we still have not identified?
I was going to bring that up because that was your job, CSI. You were...
Right. Our team is there to try to identify those victims, those that have died. And we used dental, fingerprints, DNA, any way that we can identify these people.
And oftentimes you had a fragment.
Only a fragment. Only a fragment, right? Because many people were, they weren't intact. Those buildings just tore people apart when they came down.
If we were to have a moment of silence, just a second, for every victim, 2,753, you and I would sit here for about 46 minutes and not say anything. And of course, we can't allow that on radio.
Right.
But if you're listening, I want you to understand the impact. 2,753 lives snatched. Not because of anything they did, not because of anything this country did, simply because those who hate us and have a different worldview. And that, my friends, is why we have to be so careful this election and have someone who's brave enough, bold enough, and willing to confront the enemy. We'll be back. We'll talk more about this, and I hope you'll stay tuned. It is not easy. We must never forget.
Hey everybody, I brought Northern Lights Pizza! And it's got Graziano sausage!
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can return the grandkids, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We'll help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Rockton Prevention is celebrating 25 years of creating a caring community. We want to say thank you to the tens of thousands of Rock High School mentors that have carried our message of health, love, and encouragement to over 1.5 million children, teachers, and parents. Our mentors teach children methods and skills to prevent bullying and drug use. Thank you to all the school administrators, teachers, and counselors for their opportunity to serve you. Rock on, fair citizens. Rock on. This is Pat McManus for Rockton Prevention, the Richard O. Jacobson Foundation, and this station.
Northern Lights Pizza, your home of the tasty crust. Our garlic butter sauce now available in 12-ounce bottles at Northern Lights, Hy-Vee, and Graziano's.
Northern Lights Pizza. From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Alrighty, we're back. I'm busy digging on I just got a text from a friend of mine in New York City, and she says, "Oh, Tamara, I was there in the city. It's a very personal story." And this is, Bob, this is the impact for so many.
Yes.
And of course, I don't want to overlook Benghazi. I want to touch on Benghazi as well. Just 4 years ago, 2012, and this is why I say to you, you cannot allow the woman who played the ad about 3 a.m. phone calls and who do you want to answer it. And then when the phone call came around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, she refused to answer it. Hillary and Obama did nothing to help Americans. 32 Americans at the consulate, the embassy, had to be rushed out of Benghazi, and they could not get a response from anybody in the American government. I think the plane they got was from Libya to get the 32 Americans out as the four brave, and these are the Patriots, but this Patriot Day became before Benghazi, so this is why I don't like the Patriot Day. And if anything, it should be remembrance of U.S. attacks over in the air over the U.S. and on the ground in Benghazi is how it should. I just don't want people to forget this. But we lost that day Ambassador Stevens. We lost his information officer, Sean Smith. And then in the fight, we lost Tyrone Wood, and we lost Glenn Doherty. And we must never forget those four brave individuals, not to mention Mark Osgeist, John Teagan, and Chris Tanto-Peranto, the survivors, who are now bravely, courageously telling the truth of what happens at their own peril. And there's a story in themselves as to the way they were treated so poorly because they are no longer military, and when they decided to speak out or go against orders, they're no longer covered. And even one, after he was in the injuries, released from hospitals, I think he had to find his own way home. I don't think the military or the America would even pay for his trip home at that point. I'm furious when I hear these things, and check that out before you quote me on that, but I think that's the story that I've heard from one of them. This, my folks, friends, is why I tell you Patriot Day does not cover it on the calendar. This is a day we were attacked. It was an act of war. It was jihad. It was terrorism. You must remember what it was in order to be willing to stand against it in the future. My friend from New York is saying, Yvonne, she's saying something I did not tell anyone for years, not even my husband. I only recently told my mother a few years ago. Maybe we'll have Yvonne come on another time. Maybe we don't have to wait until another year to talk about 9/11. These memories, these discussions are good because, Bob, as you and I are trying to help people understand, it's how you live your life every day. It's the kindness, it's the love, it's the family, it's the fellowship, it's the kind answer versus the harsh answer in the checkout line. Mm-hmm. It's the polite wave when someone wants over in your lane rather than the flipping someone off.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the way it was immediately following the attacks when people, the churches filled, people drove around with flags on their cars, and every house had flags in front. I'm just saying that there was a breakout of, patriotism, if you want to call it that, and love for America and love for their fellow man. Even in New York, when I was there, they were treating us, like celebrities. Those that responded, those that went to help, people were cheering us on as we drove by to go to Ground Zero. And I never experienced that because I was raised up in the East Coast and used to work in New York. And that was a huge change that happened, in New York after that. And then eventually people started, stopping, and it just ended. It kind of ended after that. I thought there'd be a change that would last, but it didn't seem to last very long.
It didn't, even concerts, they would play the anthem.
Yes.
Before the concert. They did that before ball games, but even concerts, and they'd play the anthem. Or if you go to an event, they would talk about the flag, and I would think, why aren't we doing this all the time? Right. Why did we ever stop? People went to church again for about 3 weeks.
Right.
And I was sharing with you before the show, one of my comforts during this time was my own son, the one in high school. When he got home that day, he was shaken. Mm-hmm. Who would not be shaken? You'd be a cold soul if you weren't. But he, during the day, had gone to his Bible somehow and written down several scriptures that he knew that had been ingrained, that we had taught, about his help coming from the Lord. With God on your side, why fear man? He knew God had a plan. There's no surprise on God's day planner. And he wrote those scriptures on the board. We have a dry erase board in our back hall, a scripture verse a week we'd memorize. And he wrote several of those comforting verses. And this mama was happy that her son, in time of turmoil and unrest, was turning to the right source of comfort. And our nation did that. Goose, did you find that clip? How long is it? 4 minutes. Let's play a little bit of it. This is the U.S. congressional body standing out on the steps of the U.S. Capitol that day and singing God Bless America. And for some, it might have been in defiance to those who wanted to destroy us. For others, it was in hope and in rest and in comfort of Jesus Christ and the God who our founding fathers trusted with the providence and protection of our country.
There on the steps of the Capitol building.
We're hearing the broadcasters
party leaders
talk
from
about it.
both houses and a number.
Well, there's a proof that the media is at least admitting leaders from both houses. There you go. There it is. Thank you, Goose. That is your elected officials coming out on the steps of the U.S. Capitol on 9/11/2001 and singing God Bless America. One, I'm thrilled they knew it. Two, you can see them. It doesn't seem like they're segregated into Democrats and Republicans. There were white and black holding hands, holding on to each other. And that's the other thing we saw that day, Bob. And if our listeners could catch anything out of this, Acts talks about we all come from one blood, one creator. It's not our different special interest groups and our PACs and the politicians, the way they like to divide us. If we could come together once again and just love those that God puts in our path, we'd be better off.
Absolutely. We were one at that time.
And that's what I missed in the memorial. I don't see that anywhere in the memorial where the the Congress came out and sang. I don't see the man who said, let's roll. I think there was a faith with him on the plane.
Correct.
I don't see that. Any of the messages they have from victims to their families, I don't see any faith or pray or anything about heaven. I think it's been scrubbed, and that irritates me. I want to know if that was there or not, because it is our strength and our belief in God Almighty that sets us apart from every other nation.
Mm-hmm.
It's what allowed him to bless this nation. He doesn't bless America because we're great. We are great because he has blessed her.
Yes.
And only when we rely on that will he be able to bless us again.
Mm-hmm.
Bob, we've got 20 seconds.
20 seconds. Wow. You're right. The only answer is Christ, in the nation. People look to him, turn to him, seek him first, and he'll take care of us all.
Absolutely. And so as you choose this election cycle, choose carefully, much prayer, but one who's willing to face the enemy and put God first again. Thank you for listening.